The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. I bought a bunch of these yellow vests on Amazon, and they were delivered yesterday, so I wanted to celebrate by wearing one of them. I recommend you find a good deal on some yellow vests too. Buying them in bulk saves money, and then you can pass them out to your friends in Milwaukee. We've talked about Burn the DNC before, hashtag BERN the DNC. They rigged the primary, we shut them down. There's even a pledge you can take. Yes, I pledged to burn the DNC. In 2016, the DNC cheated Bernie and gave us Trump. 4 years later, they haven't learned a thing. If they rig the primary again, we will mobilize in mass civil disobedience and shut down the convention in Milwaukee. We will also disrupt local Democratic Party offices across the country. Sign up and tell the DNC loud and clear what will happen if they block the political revolution we desperately need and deserve. Are you ready to shut down the convention in Milwaukee or your hometown if the DNC rigs the primary again? How would you like to help, and which working groups do you want to join? I'm down to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. I will help reach out to my network, Action/Logistics Working Group, Art Working Group, Finance/Fundraising Working Group, Media/Messaging Working Group, Outreach Working Group, Political Outreach Working Group, Regenerative/Support Culture Working Group, Tech Working Group. I can help with facilitation. I am planning to be in Milwaukee. Yes, I am planning to be in Milwaukee. I am planning to be a delegate. I can help organize an action at local Democratic Party office. I can attend an action at a local Democratic Party office. I am volunteering with Bernie's campaign. And you put your name and an email address and so forth and hit the submit button. Seemingly, this campaign is going well. 11,000 people like it on Facebook. I've shared this on my Facebook, and I've told my friends and relatives and neighbors that I plan to be in Milwaukee for the convention in July. Now, as for shutting down the convention, that may be an overly ambitious idea. In 1968, they tried to do it. This is what they were up against. This is what it looked like. Vice President Hubert Humphrey won the Democratic presidential nomination, and he didn't even win any primaries. While that was happening, thousands of protesters streamed out of Grant Park into a sea of tear gas and billy clubs. Some were caught in a crush against the facade of a Hilton hotel and fell through the plate glass, cutting themselves on shards. People on upper floors threw crystal ashtrays, one of which struck a passerby and shattered, embedding glass in his eyes. Blood ran from skulls into gutters. Someone tried to overturn a police van. All the while, the crowd was chanting, "The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching."
It's really the start of kind of protest movements that we see today.
The police were pushing the group I was in through the windows and coming into the hotel in the glass and beating us. Outside, somebody shouted, "The whole world is watching, the whole world is watching." That became the chant as people were tear-gassed and beaten and taken away to jail.
The power of television beaming those images, creating a spectacle that overshadowed the convention itself, is what made the convention to become much more organized, carefully created and produced and controlled. It became an event more akin to the Olympic Games or the Super Bowl, with the idea being, of course, safety, but also avoiding having the story be what's happening outside the arena instead of inside the arena. That's why you see today these so-called free speech zones, where there is protest and there is dissent expressed at the conventions, but it's done in a controlled area that is closely guarded by law enforcement.
So if you're thinking about shutting down the convention in Milwaukee, you're going to see cages like that. And you're going to see militarized police.
In 2004, during the Iraq War, there were large protests down some of the largest avenues in Manhattan.
I protested at the 2004 Republican National Convention. It was a massive demonstration. National media and global media covered it, but none of that coverage came out in real time.
So none of the coverage came out in real time in Philadelphia either. They were about to show some protests in the street on national television, and then they cut to Boys to Men as soon as they realized things were getting out of hand outside. So if you weren't there, you couldn't really get a sense of what was happening. There's also the very likely possibility that they won't have a convention this year. Because of the COVID-19 scare, they might just find a different way to do things. You'll notice in all of these images how many people there are and how close together they are, which is probably not a good thing to have in a pandemic. But even more important, if you're an oligarch, you don't want people getting out together and deciding that they want to replace you, that they want to dethrone you.
Weren't there. You couldn't really get a sense of what happened. It was very quickly broken up. There were a large number of arrests, which later resulted in a class action lawsuit that the protesters actually won because it was illegal to beat them and arrest them.
It makes him wrong.
What makes this year different, leading up to the two conventions, is what we've seen so far during this campaign.
I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Unprecedented amount of protest and violence at Trump events has some people concerned about what's going to take place in Cleveland.
We won't tolerate violence of any kind. It's your right to voice your opinion, and we even allow people to march in the streets. But
we even allow people to march in the streets. So whatever you're going to do in this country, it's going to be allowed or you're not going to be able to do it. How do you feel about that?
if it becomes a safety issue, then we'll have to do what law enforcement does and keeping everybody safe.
That guy looks really safe. We'll have to do what law enforcement does. Dear viewers and listeners, you ought to know what you're in for. You ought to know what you're up against.
Anyone have a towel?
The convention center will actually be in what's called a security zone, under the control of the Secret Service, with admission only with
a security zone with credentialed admittance overseen by the Secret Service. That's what we'll have in Milwaukee too, I'm sure.
And hear the marchers.
And certainly in Philadelphia too, Bernie Sanders has a cadre of supporters on the left who are not happy that he lost the nomination. Taking that and also...
He didn't lose the nomination. It was denied him by the oligarchy.
So the general protest movement aligned with the left. It's a recipe for a sizable protest as well.
Protesters will be allowed to stand on FDR Park. Now that may sound to you like they're going to be right across the street, but it's a 9-lane highway with a median with trees in it. So you see, it's not a lot of visibility.
It seems to me that they wouldn't have to have all of these plans made in advance to separate the protesters from the rest of the convention if they didn't know in advance that it was rigged and that people would need to protest it.
I think that the frustration that people have are the same, but things have changed a lot. And now, if you're at a protest, you see, hundreds of thousands of images being shared. So the whole world is watching. That's very exciting.
So we need lots of images if there is a convention. In Philadelphia, the Bernie delegates stormed out of the convention into the streets. But this is what was happening inside the convention hall. This is the story that most Americans were being told. They didn't see what was going on outside. So there you have it. Look at all those balloons. And it'll look like that again as they coronate whoever they coronate. If there are any protests, you're not going to see it on television. You're not going to see it on legacy media. And most baby boomers won't see it at all. They'll think everything's fine. Oh, Bernie lost. Oh well, we'll try harder next time. The Bernie or bust movement, in my mind, has always been to scare the middle-aged suburban Democrats into voting for a progressive candidate. But the boomers have their heads up the asses of the corporate media. And up their own asses. And so there was no way to reach them with our message. The Bernie or bust message was not available on legacy media. It's hard to scare people if they don't even know you exist. So in the 72-hour period before Super Tuesday, corporate media waded in and the boomers went with them. Yes, I feel we should protest. Yes, I still have a room paid for in Milwaukee. I hope I'm going to be able to use it. But if not, dear listeners and viewers, what should we do then? Nick Brana of Burn the DNC has some ideas about joining the Movement for a People's Party. There's lots of talk among Bernie or busters about Movement for a People's Party or some other third party. Movement for a People's Party was founded in 2017 by Bernie 2016 volunteers, delegates, and staffers who saw that, per Gallup and other polls, the majority of Americans now want a major new party, including an even higher number of young and working people. We felt the Democrats would keep rigging their rules in primaries, and progressives would need to form a new, genuinely progressive party to win the political revolution. I was one of the founders, having concluded that the Democratic Party was hopelessly corporate after lobbying the superdelegates for Bernie 2016 and starting our revolution with him. MPP has been working diligently for the past 3 years so that progressives would be ready in the event of another rigged primary. We're an all-volunteer nonprofit that only takes small-dollar grassroots donations. We've built up to about 57,000 signups over email, 37,000 on Facebook, and 23,000 on Twitter. We've been endorsed by and hosted events with some amazing people in our movement like Cornel West, Abby Martin, Chris Hedges, Oliver Stone, Tim Canova, Cindy Sheehan, and Jimmy Dore. I was thrilled to see 94% of the Burn the DNC folks vote in favor of creating a new party last week. That's when Eleanor Goldfield, Caitlin SB, and Phil, and Shells, and I thought we'd see if instead of creating a parallel group with the same mission and working groups, our groups would want to combine our strength and become a force to be reckoned with. On the call tonight, we talked about reinventing the very concept of the party by building a vibrant and decentralized movement party that focuses on direct action and civil disobedience as well as elections. I like that idea. I'm happy to say that MPP members voted almost unanimously in favor of merging tonight, so it's up to everyone at Burn the DNC if we'd like to do it. Both groups have hundreds of new volunteers to onboard, and we could bring everyone into this Slack. Slack is the communication method we're using here that I'm reading from, and have robust working groups firing on all cylinders. It gives us thousands more people to engage in direct actions on issues like Medicare for All and disrupt the Milwaukee DNC convention if it goes ahead. Ann Kay on this Slack says, MPP must be outside the current political system or face the same roadblocks that Bernie or any progressive will face. As I said, a movement is not just a party. It must address the injustice of the current system and amass so many people that it overwhelms the status quo. The Republican Party was a movement that merged with the Democratic Party in reality that props up the current system and the deep state as well as the endless wars and corporate elite. We must think outside the box and see that numbers matter. There are more of us than them, and that frightens the hell out of them, the current duopoly of corporate elites and the deep state. That is why I tried to warn the people interested in this that there may be more than just resistance to what we are trying to do. Yes, we must focus on issues, but amass and unite all parties to join in a whole movement, not just a party. Focus on a movement and continue to build on community and ideas. This may very well be our only hope. I agree with Ann that we need to amass people from both of the current parties. There are economically progressive Republican voters, as well as economically progressive Democratic voters, as well as economically progressive independent voters. One of the drawbacks of starting a new party is the identity politics that will jump up. Social conservatives versus social liberals are one problem. There are just so many ways to divide people if they are trying to join a new party. Everyone wants to know, well, what kind of people are in this party? The second problem is that the oligarchs will just buy this party too, and then they will set our agenda for us. They will continue to manufacture our consent through the corporate media that they will still own and will end up right where we are now. On the other hand, a movement could co-opt the punditry. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. We could make new laws that would not allow media outlets to be owned by vastly wealthy people. A movement can force politicians and judges and pundits to our will. Politicians typically go in whichever direction they're pushed the hardest. So if we have a big pushing machine, a big movement that will push, we could push the politicians to defund themselves. We could overturn Citizens United, and we could make other laws that make it impossible for politicians and pundits to receive big dollar donations. We could also force the politicians to make laws that make billionaires extinct. A movement is the answer. A movement is much more difficult to hijack than a party. I countered with, combining forces is a potent idea, but I'm leery of making it an official political party because our owners will simply purchase it and own it too. A movement is something that can hold all political parties, politicians, judges, and pundits accountable. Here's an Intercept article that shows us just how accountable Elizabeth Warren is to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley megadonor Carla Jurvetson fueled Elizabeth Warren's super PAC with $14 million donation. In a campaign finance filing late on Friday, Persist PAC, the super PAC that attempted to revive Senator Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign, finally disclosed its donors. Carla Jurvetson, a Silicon Valley megadonor who made over 500 donations over the last year alone, provided 96% of the super PAC's financing through a $14.6 million donation. So who owns Elizabeth Warren? And what would keep Carla from funding a new party? And then what kinds of strings could she then pull? Here's another idea that might work even if they don't have a convention in Philadelphia. This movement would fit nicely with the other movements we're describing. Call for a general strike against genocidal negligence by American Johnson. American lives in Vietnam. I've watched his videos and he sounds like an American. He says our demands are universal health care, protection from COVID-19, and living wages. Hashtag General Strike 2020. Note, to make it very clear, we are not advocating for on-the-street activity during the COVID-19 crisis. We are calling on workers to stay home and deny our labor from now until our demands are met. I checked this morning and this hashtag is trending on Twitter, so he's not the only one saying this. Wealthy elites are willing to expose workers to a deadly virus for profit, yet deny us the human right of universal health care. The government is failing to work towards aggressive containment of the pandemic. These elites don't value our lives, but they value our labor. It is time for a general strike. Why? Wealthy capitalists around the world are failing to protect workers from COVID-19. In the USA, too little is being done too late to protect us from the disease. Countless working poor people are having to go to work with symptoms because we can't afford to take time off. Test kits seem to be universally available for professional athletes and celebrities, but working people across the country are being denied proper testing and health care. The USA is the wealthiest nation in the world, but that wealth is trapped and hoarded by the capitalist class. A good example of that is the $1.5 trillion bailout that we just got for banks. Turns out we didn't even have to raise taxes to do that, so how you gonna pay for that has been moot all along. Vietnam is a poor developing country. The Vietnam government was prepared for pandemic and provides free testing, healthcare, housing, and food, mandatory quarantine, to anyone who may have been exposed until fully recovered. The state also pays quarantined workers a stipend. Comparison between Vietnam and USA infection rates. Vietnam infection rate is 1 out of every 1.68 million people. Vietnam deaths, 0. The USA infection rate is 1 out of every 93,834 people. USA deaths, 68. Vietnam's slogan during this crisis is "No person left behind," and the generous containment and support package is working. The USA could definitely afford to provide this kind of care and emergency relief. The wealthy elites simply do not value our lives. Compare the Vietnamese 2,300 GDP with the US 59,000 GDP in 2017. Many wealthy elites are flying off to bunkers and enjoying luxury personal doctors during this crisis. They are leaving us to die while they are hiding in private jets and bunkers while we continue to work for their profits. When the stock market began to drop, the USA Fed was able to immediately generate $1.5 trillion to protect the interests of capital. The USA has an incredible capacity to help workers also. They simply choose not to, because they simply do not care about our lives. This disease is much more likely to kill the elderly, the poor/uninsured, the immunocompromised. Systemic neglect has always constituted genocide. In the context of a pandemic, the cruelty of denying the human right of healthcare is even more apparent. It is time to demand the government and wealthy elites pay attention and provide the health care, containment, and wages which they withhold from us. They are wealthy because of our labor. It's time for a general strike. I will point out again that according to BLS statistics, Bureau of Labor Statistics, we make 400% more in terms of productivity than we did in 1950, but our wages have remained stagnant. It's another good reason for a general strike. And who should join the strike? Every workplace should be organized and should join if possible, but perhaps we can start by supporting and encouraging workers at these companies. McDonald's, Walmart, Kroger, Subway, Burger King, Pizza Hut, Target, Marriott, and Wendy's. I would talk to truckers and teachers. The National Education Association's leadership are probably in bed with big money, but the rank and file of the NEA would probably support this idea of a general strike. And I think lots of truckers would too. In the Facebook group Black Smoke Matters that had over 26,000 members, there was always talk about striking and shutting down the country until the government could come to its senses. If we want a government of we the people, we're going to have to disempower the wealthy corporations and banksters. Wealthy corporations put their employees on the front lines, exposing them to the risk of infection in fast food, retail, and service jobs, yet they do not provide paid sick leave. This is the savage cruelty of capitalism. We will profit from your labor, but we won't protect you. How do we organize a general strike? Through organization! If you are not already a member, consider joining IWW, Industrial Workers of the World, the one big union which anyone can join. Democratic Socialists, a socialist political party with chapters across the USA. You can be a Bernie Sanders campaign member or volunteer. Then you are already plugged into a massive nationwide organization. If you're a member of a trade union, now you can get active. We have structures, we have communication networks, we only need to put them to use. At the end of this article is a link called General Strike 2020, The Plan, and you might want to read that. I'll leave you with the idea of a general strike, and you can start to think about it yourself. If you go on Twitter, you can join in the conversation there. Also, sharing this video and other videos and tweets about this idea is good. Going on Facebook is good. The more that people are talking about this, the better. I'm hopeful that economic populism will take root in these times. I'm hopeful that economic populists will stand up together, whether they're socially conservative or socially liberal. And I'm hopeful that our movement can push politicians on both sides of the political aisle to do the right thing. And if we start a new political party, I'm hopeful that our movement can push them in the right direction as well and continue to keep them going in the right direction if they start out well, but then show signs of fading away. Please add your comments under this video. Please subscribe to this channel. Please share this video and others with your friends and neighbors and comfortable suburban Democrats. And keep on burning. Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernier bus train. The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.